how I got into trading full-time, the answer would be divorce. I started with £100 that the judge gave me when I was bankrupt. I had to learn how to do everything myself. Then you didn't have MetaTrader or things like this. You actually started doing the markets on a piece of paper. People sent signals out through emails and they didn't care if you won or lost. I would be the only person that would go online face-to-face with people. You need to be looking at a number of other items happening in the same area to give you an even better chance. Hi, I'm Paul Chalmers and I'm the CEO of UK Trading Academy, the largest trading academy in the world, and I've been trading for 25 years. So born in Wales in the 60s, my house, where it was, we had green fields all around. Used to go over to the farm, get chased by the farmer with a shotgun, go picking apples, out with your friends, chatting, talking, kicking the ball in the road. When I went to comprehensive school, unfortunately, I did get bullied. I got bullied quite significantly, especially by this one guy who was like the hardest guy in the school, and he would fight everyone. I didn't enjoy going to school. I was frightened going to school. He was on the same bus as me when I was coming home. And he was always threatening to beat me up, so to speak. It was very, very difficult for those years in school. All of my friends in the road that we played with, they all came out with O-levels, plenty of O-levels. I came out with 1. During that period of time, I had been offered an apprenticeship in the steelworks in Talbot, the apprenticeship that I wanted. But because I didn't get the qualifications, I couldn't go there. I lost that apprenticeship. And that meant a lot to me because I wanted to get out into industry and start working. So I had to go back to 6R, they called it, 6 reset. It was where all the failures go back to school to try and get some more results. And I worked and came out with 1 year later, 10 O-levels. So I did 9 in a year, which is almost unheard of. Well, a year later, I went back and reapplied, and this time I got it. And I was able to start. That changed because you were then in a working environment. Everything was different. It was discipline, but very different discipline to being in school. And I flourished in that area. I wanted to do well. I came out of my apprenticeship after doing electronic engineering because electronics was just starting then in the industry. And I was at the right place at the right time. The steelworks in Talbot was going downhill during that period of time, and they were reducing the labor force. And I was the only apprentice to be able to be taken on full time. And I went into something called the hot mill. And that's where everything changed because I still did behind the scenes all the way up to my higher national diploma, because you have to do the qualifications as well, but also then spent time in industry. And also during that period of time, there was an expansion which was approved by the government for the hot mill to have all brand new equipment. Instead of doing things the old-fashioned way, computers were just starting to come into industry then. And the latest computers, which were PLCs, programmable logic controllers, I was put on to days instead of being on shifts as a technician, part of the team that implemented the new hot mill. I was working in the ovens, where it warmed everything up ready to start rolling. But it taught me a brand new way of looking at how I could go forward in the future with computer systems. So this was a huge leap in technology for the industry. I got involved into great detail. I was able by the end of it to be able to be a very good programmer because I would learn how to program it, but I'd have to look at the logic and also then going forward looking at how that controlled the machinery. And that started to take me into the earliest form of algorithms. And it actually set me up for my future career because I became one of the experts on programmable logic controllers and how to implement them in the whole of the UK. Once that was all done and we were running, it obviously changed the way that you roll steel in the world. To open it, it was that large that the now King Charles, was Prince Charles then, he came to open it. And I was lucky enough to be chosen as one of the people on the route. When I was in industry, I was quite aggressive going up the ladder. In fact, now I look back at myself, I didn't like the person that I was. I didn't care about anybody else. I just cared about myself and how I could climb that ladder. And I climbed the ladder very, very quickly. When I was working for Mitsubishi, I was the youngest engineering manager in South Wales, working for a Japanese company. I was sort of putting more tools into my tool belt. It wasn't just engineering anymore. I started to get involved in the finances of the company. Then the money side of the world starts coming to you differently than it was as an engineer. I didn't worry about too much. Looking at banking, looking at transfer systems because we're selling our products abroad. So I wanted to increase the knowledge that I had. And that's how I started getting into trading. Way before I opened UK Trading Academy. This was something that I did as a hobby. Because I'm so old, as I said earlier, then you didn't have MetaTrader or things like this. You actually started doing the markets on a piece of paper. So you would be placing trades by phoning up a broker and placing those trades. So it was very, very different to what you would do now. Nowadays, you just go into MetaTrader and you do whatever analysis you're doing, you press a button and you're in control of everything. This was very, very different, and it meant that you had to understand the markets far, far better. And I think this was fundamental in me understanding more of how the markets worked and how I could make money from the markets. I believe that trading the way I did, with pieces of paper and making the candles myself, and then doing the analysis, I think that set me up very well for being able to come into the digital age. Probably there were more fundamental analysis traders then than there are now. Because if you look at the traders now, they want to do technical analysis. I used to use technical analysis, and I'm using a lot of the same concepts now and being very successful at it, and my students are successful, because we're using the same strategies as we used in the past. The type of things you would be looking at are the push and pulls of a trend, you know, where you're looking for. But most importantly, that a lot of people don't do is something called confluence. So what I mean by confluence is you see a lot of traders and they have indicators. And if there's an arrow that comes up or something happens, they go into that trade. You need to be looking at a number of other items happening in the same area to give you an even better chance. How I got into trading full-time. And it's very unusual because the answer would be divorce. I was working in industry. I was working for Tyco, Operations Director UK and Europe for their waterworks department. And that meant I was away in different areas of the world all the time. Unfortunately, my marriage failed, and the children wanted to come with me, which meant that I needed to not be in the job I was doing. So I'd gone all the way up the ladder very, very quickly. And I realized that on a phone call with a lawyer that they said, you have a chance of getting your kids, but not with the job you have. And therefore, it took me about 5 seconds to say, that's it, I'm finishing. Through the divorce and through everything that happened, I went bankrupt. I had to go bankrupt, but I had my kids. My children were given to me by the same judge that made me bankrupt. And we were living on a caravan in an ex-scrapyard. So I'd gone all the way up the top and then come so fast down you can't believe. But I would do it again for my kids. What I had to do then is I had to do something very, very different than I was doing. And of course, I then said, why don't I make my hobby my job? So why don't I start, looking at what I can do to trade myself and also help people to trade. And I realized that to be successful in the senior roles that I was in, I needed people with me. And there was a huge change in me, in how I was, in my attitude, in the way that I treated people. Because I realized that if I brought people along, if I taught them what they needed to do, if I guided them in their roles to be the best they can possibly be, there's no effect on my role whatsoever, because if they're good enough to take my position, great, because then I can go up another level and look at other things that I can do to improve the company. It frees up my time. Now my emphasis changed from me to what I can do for everybody else, because if I can do the right thing for everybody else, I will naturally be successful. 20 years after I'd left school, I was with my children and I was a very, very successful person. In the changing room, there was the bully. Where I would have thought, if I ever see this guy again, I'm just going to crumble, I didn't. I actually went up and spoke to him. I said, I'm Paul, hope you remember me. I told him what I was doing, and he told me what, I said, I'm running a major company. He told me, yeah, and I'm a taxi driver. And I looked at that and I thought to myself, my God, isn't life a great leveler as well? You know, no matter what happens when you're younger, it's surprising how life then comes back to you, if you know what I mean, and how things can change. It taught me that no matter what challenges that you have, you just face them and you see them as a problem to solve rather than a problem. When I became bankrupt and I had my children and couldn't do the job that I was doing, I had to do something different. I therefore spent around 1.5 years generating UK Trading Academy. I would be the only person that would go online actually face-to-face with people, because people sent signals out through emails and they didn't care if you won or lost. They would do things where you would buy something, but it didn't matter what the result was, as long as that person got their money. Just informally, I was sort of saying, right, these are the trades that I'm taking. So people could see the trades that I was taking during the day, and then it was up to them whether they wanted to follow those trades or not. And I would give some analysis on what the market was doing. When I was running the academy for about 1.5 years, I started getting my customers saying, Paul, we'd like you to formally teach us. And that's where the educational side came in, because then I said, okay, I will teach you. I will do formal educational courses, and I will teach you what I know so that you can then do what I can do. I'm very proud of what I've achieved with UK Trading Academy, because I started with £100 that the judge gave me when I was bankrupt. I had to learn how to make websites myself. I had to learn how to do everything myself. We're one of the most successful academies in the world. We are the only private educator in UK and Europe to be able to offer up to a master's degree outside of university. There is no other academy able to do that. I'd like people to remember me as somebody who wanted to help others, not just myself. A lot of people in the industry just want to make money for themselves. But I want to provide quality. I want to be able to teach people correctly how to make money from the markets. So how I want to be remembered by is me providing my knowledge in my head to other people to allow them to succeed.